Welcome to Let's Talk the Size of Players. I'm Paul, the guy behind DrivingMaul, and a couple of days ago I got a comment on YouTube, it's on YouTube, that said from Lacopo De Stefani, and I'm sorry if I butchered how you say your name, but it was along the lines of, I don't find very appealing that nowadays players need to reach unprecedented levels of fitness to be able to break through the defences. There's a bit more about that, but that's the quote that I'm going to take from the comment. Basically, this is about the size of players. If we look at comparing players now to in the amateur era, not that long ago, players are much bigger. And this is obviously down to the fact that they can train full time. But there's also another factor that has got involved in this, and this is that we have 7 subs. So let's look at how we've got to 7 subs, and also, and then we'll circle back to the thing about the size of players. First off, we had subs and they were only for injuries. And then obviously people can fake injuries. So we said, okay, right, well, we're not going to do that for injuries, just for injuries. We're going to have a set number. And then if you go beyond that, then the player has to be injured and goes off the pitch. Then we had the dangerous dangers in scrums, and can go to uncontested scrums instead. And so we said, you know what, let's have a full front row on the bench so we don't have to have uncontested scrums. And this has led to the sorry, I was going to comment here. I was 17 stone 6 fly half playing in English Championship. And this has come to the fact that now front row players only have to play 50 to 60 minutes of the game. And something I talked about last year was whether we were going to have players that would train only to play 20 to 30 minutes, and we'd have specialist bench players coming along. And having that many players means that the props can be a certain size, run around a lot. No, they don't have to last the full 80 minutes. And then another guy comes on fresh, who's also big, who only knows he only has to last 20 minutes. And they get around a lot more. And this is removing a lot of the space that we used to see on the pitch, because all the players are fitter, and also we're replacing more of the players, so the players can move around a lot more, cover a lot more space, and defensive lines staying intact later, in fact, all the way through the game, and we're not getting the space that we used to see through player fatigue, essentially. So what is the, and then so if you don't get space, then you have to bash yourself straight over. And this is, apparently I'm talking about a point that James Haskell came up with last week. And yes, it's something we've been talking about for a while. And an idea that came up, so basically what we're talking about is trying to create space, especially later in the game, and trying to get players to be more fatigued, to create that space. And one of the options that I've heard and that I've seen I think is really good is keep the bench with 7 players, but only allow, say, 3 substitutions. So that way teams have the flexibility to get the right players to replace an injured player, and we're not going to end up with props playing on the wing or anything silly like that, or we're not going to have players trying to play in the front row when they're not trained for it and getting injured and hurting themselves. So we still have the range of options, but just reduce how many people are allowed to make. That way, when they can't replace their entire front row, a second row, a back row player, you can't replace like most of the, basically have a brand new scrum during the game. You'll only be able to replace a couple of players. That way players will get fatigued during the game, and because of that they'll have to change how they train, because they won't be able to carry that amount of bulk around the pitch for 80 minutes. What they'll do is they'll do a bit more aerobic rather than power training, and they'll reduce in size. And if we have our props and our second rows reducing in size, then we're also not going to have as much power or as much of an impact at scrum time. So it could also have a knock-on effect on the amount of injuries, because of the amount of weight that's going through the scrum as well. But that's a side issue really, and a side benefit to the idea that we'll have players getting more tired towards the end of the games. In that last 10-15 minutes, they will that will create more space and we'll have more attacking play. And also teams won't then have to be just bashing through players the whole game. So that's my solution to try and reduce the size of players. It's not about, there's been talk of reducing the number of players, i.e. take both flankers off and get down to 13 men, and then you've got less players on the pitch, which would get us very close to rugby league, which I don't think anybody wants. People have talked about trying to increase the size of the pitches. We can't do that because so many pitches are being built, so many grounds are being built. The cost of extending all those grounds is just unreasonable and unfeasible. So we've got to try and, so if you're going to have the same number of players on the pitch, on the same size pitch, the only way you're going to create space is to make them move around slower, and hence make them more tired. So there you go, that's my solution around size of players, is we should have 7 players on the bench, but only allowed to use probably 3 of those as substitutes. If anyone gets injured after that, you go down to 14 men. And that would also mean that you'd be saving 1 or 2 of those as injury replacements later in the game rather than using them as substitutions as well. And that's so thank you very much for joining me. Thank you very much for the comments that we've been having during the show. If you're watching this on Twitter or Periscope, please do share it. If you're watching this on YouTube, please do give it a thumbs up. It all helps to get the word out there. Also, in the title, if you watch on Periscope or Twitter, is a link to join my newsletter, which comes out once a week on a Thursday, so you don't miss anything. And down below in YouTube, you can sign up for the same newsletter. Thank you very much for joining me. Some of the topics that I will be looking at, talking about next week, is how do you go about picking a Lions squad. We've got lots of people picking their Lions 15s and all that kind of stuff. I want to talk about the mechanics behind it and what decisions should be made around that. Talking about management, we've had a bunch of managers or head coaches or directors of rugby, whatever you want to call them, being fired mid-season. So I want to talk around about that. Club ownership is also a bit of an issue at the moment with the Gloucester takeover, and we've also had various high-profile owners speaking out, especially in Bath and Toulon. So again, I want to have a quick chat about that at some point, and also the old thing about summer rugby. So those are all topics I'll be coming up in Let's Talk. So please do check in, and thank you for joining me. Do join the conversation via Twitter or in the comments below in YouTube. Thanks, guys, and talk to you all probably Monday now, as it's Friday. Finally, I am also going to do a live reaction to the Chiefs Blues game tonight, which is going to be on YouTube. So if you want to hear my thoughts and also Scott's around the game, then join us on YouTube. Cheers, and enjoy whatever rugby you're watching this weekend.